I want to apologize in advance. Number one, because I haven't done one of these in like 60 years. And number two, because I have allergies, so my voice is gonna sound extra shitty. So, apologies in advance. But today, in Hunting Grounds, once again, I want to talk about something that I don't think I've talked about before, actually. And that's the really strange gems that you can find in Bloodborne and how they just sort of look like leftovers for a system that they may have wanted to implement in Dark Souls. And really, blood gems don't really fit in Dark Souls because it has a more straightforward upgrading system for your weapons. In the sense that you don't really put anything in them, you just put upgrade materials, a weapon infusion, and if you have a normal weapon, you can buff it. Pretty standard stuff. When I'm talking about the Bloodborne gems specifically, is some of the effects. They really do seem like effects that are more suited for Dark Souls rather than Bloodborne. Let me give you an example. Have you ever gotten a gem in Bloodborne that says, "This gem will reduce the stamina cost"? Normally that sounds really awesome. That would be really good. If you have 3 of those that are pretty top tier, they reduce your stamina, let's say, a combined total of minus, 25% stamina reduction. That's pretty good for, say, heavy weapons. And it's very good for spamming, obviously. The reason why I say those effects, those gems are kind of weird and they seem to me like Dark Souls leftovers is because in Bloodborne, you don't really benefit from sacrificing damage over having, I don't know what you would call it, support type effects. Of course, it would be amazing if you could have those effects without having to sacrifice damage, have your cake and eat it too, sort of a thing. But I always found it strange that these types of gems were included because other than someone that has literally no gems at all, there's no real use for them. You don't really want to equip something that says, "Oh, I'll reduce the stamina cost of your attacks," over something like, "I'll increase your damage output by 22%. What do you think about that? It's like, oof, tough choice, huh? Not really. Not in Bloodborne, at least. Hell, not in any game, really. When you're really thinking about it, damage really is king. Now, the thing that really gets me is that if you were to add accessories in Bloodborne that gave you these secondary type or support type of effects, that would be interesting. Or rather, that would have been interesting. Not much use in thinking about, that kind of thing right now because the game has been out for so long. But it would have been interesting to see what types of combinations players would go with. Because if you have, like, let's say that a hunter can wear rings, just as an example. Let's say that you have a ring that can give you, a percentage boost in adding poison. That's one example. A ring that will reduce the stamina cost of your attacks. That would go well for people that use things like Ludwig's Holy Blade, Kirkhammer, anything that's huge. That would be amazing. So I think it's very restrictive to keep those to just the blood gems. This is of course because they didn't think about adding an accessory system. Strangely enough, one of the things that they could have ported over to Bloodborne was the ring system. You could have added rings with these secondary type effects and you just left everything else as it is. So you could have put those effects into the rings and then keep gems to be only exclusive to, giving you damage. So gems would be exclusive to just modifying your damage output, while the rings would have given you those secondary weird gem effects that we don't really see ever. Of course I'm not saying that there aren't insane players that have really good, what would you call them? Yeah, gem setups for their weapons with these crazy secondary effects. But it is very strange that they just decided that, yeah, these are good for Bloodborne, a game that's primarily about rushing your foes and being aggressive. It's like, I don't know about that. Those secondary effects don't seem that great. And of course I am calling them secondary effects because again, I consider damage boost to be a primary effect, arguably the most important. And with that, I want to transition into talking about just a little fun what if scenario. When it comes to what it would have meant for Bloodborne PvP if we had a ring system or an accessory system that would give us these secondary effects. So, of course, some effects benefit certain type of weapons. Because in Bloodborne, you don't really... your stats aren't really the star of the show. The star of the show, as I've said before, are the weapons. They really bring out the good part of the Bloodborne combat. It's the weapons. They really shine when you're... not only when you're mashing R1, but when you're timing your attacks, when you're deciding when to use a charge attack, when to transform your weapon. Are you better off using your primary form, secondary form, etc. So things like that would have been interesting to see how they mix with the accessory system that I conjured up in my head. So of course heavy weapon builds would go with stamina down, or what would you call it, less stamina penalties, accessories that would give you that kind of thing. However, it doesn't mean that it's only going to be for heavy weapons. If your main weapon is gonna be a saw cleaver, guess what? A ring that lets you consume less stamina for each swing is gonna be amazing for saw cleaver spam. Blades of Mercy, holy shit, can you imagine that? That would be insane. But it's that kind of insanity that makes me feel warm inside whenever I think about it. I'm not really a guy that's about game and balance. I don't really give a shit. Of course, the hot topic of PvP games having a specific balance is just a never-ending argument between people that never agree on anything ever. But at least on my part, I like to have a quote-unquote balance where it leans more towards crazy shit. Not necessarily the monotone style that they went with for, let's say, Dark Souls 3 PvP, where it's kind of, the game flow is like 1, 2, you get hit, 1, 2, roll away, 1, 2, roll away. It's balanced. Weirdly enough, it's balanced. It would be really unbalanced if you got infinitely stun locked like you could in vanilla Dark Souls 2. For those of you that remember that, well, yeah, your stun lock would only end if your stamina ended. So that's something that needs to be addressed. That is something that needs to be balanced. However, modifying weapon damage, modifying weapons to quote-unquote balance them, I don't really agree with that, because balance for development teams, especially nowadays, just means to neuter a weapon or to neuter something that the player is using to be really strong. I don't believe in taking power away from the player, which is why even though Bloodborne PvP can be really fucking stupid, where people are one or two shotting each other with top tier blood tinge skill builds or whatever, when you remove that, when you don't have that, because nobody really tryhards in Bloodborne anymore unless you're 1v1ing in Chalice dungeons or something, because you don't have that as much anymore, it really shines. The combat really shines. It's still there. You can still find people that have ridiculous damage output. But that's again where it all comes in, where what if we had a system in Bloodborne that allowed you to equip rings? What if there was a ring, for example, something really crazy? A lot of people, this is a really controversial one. What if there was a ring that acted like, what's it called? Tears of Denial, or like a second chance sort of thing, but only for visceral attacks. So one of the problems in PvP, at least for Bloodborne, really in all the Souls games, is random pairing, but it is more prevalent in Bloodborne because the parry is just a gunshot. So if you're a big weapon user, for example, because they tend to have slower swing speed, and you're facing a 2v1 or a 3v1, and let's say that the three of them are spamming the blunderbuss, for example. They don't do damage, of course not, but they can catch you with a random parry because it's three of them. That's 3 chances for you to get parried for each swing that you do. So that's kind of fucked up, right? So what if there was a ring that allowed you to not die when you would otherwise die from a visceral attack, right? That would mean that you would get a second chance at maybe coming back up, avoiding all the crap they're gonna throw at you, and then have a chance to run away and heal. That would have been amazing. Sadly, we don't have that. But, you know, thinking about the what ifs is fun, especially now that we have no fucking Elden Ring news or anything, so we have nothing to talk about when it comes to From Software games other than what we already have. Something like that is the kind of thing that I personally like to see in video games. Is surviving a visceral attack that would one-shot you something that would break the game's balance? I don't know, I'm too tired to argue anymore. That I leave that up to you, whoever is watching. But that's the kind of thing that I really like to see in games where you have options, where they give you different options to play around with mixing and matching effects, whether it's accessory effects, spell effects, etc. But yeah, that's just kind of one thing that I was thinking about. So it feels good to make another Hunting Grounds video. I hope that you enjoyed the footage, and I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.